From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, it's great to be back. I'm here looking forward to another conversation with our guest from last week.
Steve, as I always say, it's always great to be back. How are you doing?
Doing well. We're recording on a Friday afternoon, so it's been a long week, but all good. It's nice to talk to friends and talk about things that we like doing. So.
Yeah,
Um,
and we welcome Aaron back, so this will be another great one.
Absolutely. If you didn't catch our last episode, 175, you got to meet Aaron Baker. He's the classroom support technician from Stephen F. Austin State University, and we'll welcome him back right now. Welcome back, Aaron.
Hey, thanks for back. Thanks for inviting me back.
Excellent. And so tune into the last episode. You could get information and an update on Aaron's background and what his experience is in AV and programming and all sorts of stuff, as we typically do. And we wanted to kick off or continue the conversation a bit in an interesting direction, which I think a lot of people will be able to relate to. And I know James will in particular. The idea of using internal resources for programming as well as external resources. And for those who don't know, my company used to be very active in doing third-party programming. We do more software development now, but certainly have played a big role in having to work with integrators and end users in different capacities, some of which had programmers and some of which didn't. But Aaron, you mentioned last time about some upgrades that you're doing, and also mentioned that you use some outside vendors. What are some of the challenges that you've run into? What are some of the things that were valuable experiences that you can share when it comes to working with outside people to do programming?
Well, I think one thing we've learned, especially with this last recent project that we got put in, no, our department actually didn't get talked to until almost the very end. And so having to rush and be like, oh hey, none of this only part of this equipment's really our current standard, but you don't really support this other stuff. So we had to scramble and try to work that out the best we could. But I think one thing is just trying to communicate of how we want, especially the UI. I think UI was the best, not the worst, but UI kind of like, hey, this is how we usually do it. Could be like while we like this, we kind of know that consistency stuff that we were always talking about. That we want it more consistent as we can, and it's kind of one of those of trying to communicate of how consistent do you want it, like, and all this other stuff. Like, we really don't need a passcode to start the system, and all this other stuff.
So the fact that you weren't involved that till late, that's definitely a challenge. And especially, and one thing that I like to talk about, and James certainly chime in, is nowadays it's very rare that you have clients or you as an outside resource, you work with somebody who doesn't have any experience or any existing systems. So there's typically standards, things that they like and that they don't like. And also there is somebody who needs to carry the torch after you're done. So that'd probably give James about an hour of things to talk about. So what can you share there, James, in terms of tips and pointers for people that are working from either perspective, internal or external, when they have to cross that bridge?
Biggest thing I would say there is you gotta listen. You gotta have an open communication. You gotta listen. I don't know how many projects I've been on, and like we'll have project meetings and we'll say, okay, we're doing it this way. This is why we're doing it this way. And then next week we'll have another project meeting and they're like, oh, we're doing this. We're like, no, we talked about this last week. It's this way because of X, Y, and Z. But The one thing that really jumped out at me, what Aaron was just saying, is I want to harp on this was they had a passcode to start the system. Right there, it shows to me that is a person who does not understand their client, their higher ed needs. Like a passcode to start the system. And it to me is like I chop this up to a non-programming thing, but I used to don't much anymore, but I used to get calls all the time, right around August, right around September time, going, "Hey, cold call, but hey, I'm blah blah blah. I'm your sales rep. I work with higher education all the time. Can we have a meeting?" My response is, if you work with higher ed, you know not to call me at this month. Like, call me in October. Like, and so it's just these signs that people they show that they don't know or understand their clients.
Yeah, I think, like, I mentioned on the last episode where, I started out with the Center for Teaching and Learning. And I think what helped me with designing our current UI is, thinking that, learning that pedagogy and all this other stuff and learning how to implement it best. Because, like, yeah, you're trying to make it easier for the instructors, but at the same time, you don't want to make it too complicated, otherwise they're not going to use the room. So, our old UI, the best way how we did it was, the old UI, how it was, Redshift is a system with 4 screens that you could actually, like, okay, put the PC on the left projector and the dot cam on the right projector and all this other stuff. But what was painful is if you wanted to change from the PC to the document cam on all the screens, you actually had to eventually hit left projector dot cam, right projector dot cam, TV dot cam. So no, and so I made it easier, and so okay, everything will switch at once. And if you want to split, we'll hit this. There's an extra button now to there's one less extra button, I guess, because you hit a advanced screen sharing that will allow you to switch your options from there. But other than that, you have your one button that the main screen is one button that changes all 4 screens at once.
Yeah, I agree. And that's I think when you have a understanding of the workflow of your users, you can design the interface and the system to work for how they need. I kind of chop it up to I'm sure you both seen the story about what was it, the World War II bombers that would come back, and the first for the longest time they were always trying to they would come back with bullet holes, and the engineers are like, okay, where do we need to reshore these planes up? Like they're coming back with these bullet holes, and we need to put more reinforcement on this side, armor, blah blah blah. And then one engineer was like, shouldn't we study the planes that don't come back? That's really that change of thought was, yeah, all these planes are coming back. Why do you need to
Right.
reshore them? Let's go for why the planes aren't coming back. And that's like, I kind of look at some of our classrooms, like we all sit here and go, oh yeah, we get all these calls from rooms that aren't working. Great. What about the calls from rooms that like about rooms that we don't get called about? Is it that the people are just so tired of those rooms and they don't use it and they just use chalkboard and we have no clue and we're just sitting here and going, "Oh, our equipment's great. It's lovely, but it's not being used." But yeah, no. So going back to that, understanding the users, you can't program unless you understand the workflow of the users.
Yeah,
It-
exactly. And I think one thing we've got out of this is, we've learned about construction documents, and that there's actually a construction document for AV. So we actually, for this new building that's actually starting out soon, we hurried up and created our own standard. Like, hey, this is what the user interface should like, all the programming and all this other stuff. So hopefully, that's gonna be something that can help out in the future too for our outside programmers.
Yeah, having that, I think having one of those documents is great. I know my old school, we had one of those, and it saved us a lot of times on the AV program. But again, this was another non-programming story. But I remember being at a meeting, on a project of a new campus. And before we got to the AV side of the conversation, the topic before on the agenda was lock and door hinges. And the GC sat there and goes, "Oh, well, the school's specing these hinges, these door locks. We can save X number of dollars. We go with these brands." And our lock shop go, "Yeah, you're not switching." And the GC is like, "Well, we use these other brands all the time. We say we're going to save so much money." And the lock shop is like, "Yeah, we tried those other brands. They don't last. You're sticking to our standard that's built in the document." And if you can get every department and have like that big standard, like there was no fault fight on the AV or IT. We're like, this is the standard. Like I remember like people would be asking like, "Oh, do I have to buy your product from blah, blah, blah?" And my response is like, I don't care where you get my product from, as long as it's this model and this specs. Like you can't deviate from that. You can get it from whoever you want as long as it's this model. Like other than that, I don't care who you get it from.
It's interesting because I have some perspective from the outside, and the fact that those standards may or may not exist, obviously, is one of those criteria, because if you have them and you present them, then I think most people would be happy to follow them, or they would at least, and may even bring some ideas to the table that could um, uh, enhance them. There are some that are going to ignore them, but I do think that for the most part, people do want to do a good job, and just like they are not talking to the users, there's a lot of times, at least in my experience, where we had asked multiple times to be able to have those conversations, and we were always kept at arm's length. So it's not always because they don't want to, it's because they can't. And so just a conversation to continue, but it does it is something that needs to get addressed, because there are too many times where there's a misalignment.
So let me kick this back to Aaron. And in your experience, how with new projects or retro repairs where you might need to work with an outside person, is it their coding and you're giving pointers, or are you going, "Here's my standard code, you load it on your machine," the system? Like, how do you go about doing that? How you build that relationship when they have their standards? So like we just mentioned, we have standards in what we do, but each company is going to have their standards. They're going to want to do it their way because they're going to save money, time, and energy, and know it's going to work. So like, is it a collaboration of both programmers getting together and going, "Okay, we built this product," or is it one programmer's product, another one just making sure it fits?
Yeah, I know. After the ordeal with our previous building there, that we ended up creating like our own little sample code to send out. It's like, hey, here's how we do things. This is how we label it, and this is how we do our screens and all this other stuff. But I mean, at the same time, we're not always married to that code. That if the other program wants to bring ideas, that we can say yay or nay to. Um, but well, guess we'll finally get to put that into full swing with this new building that's coming up here in a couple of years. So hopefully we'll have a little bit better results than what we've had in the past. Because even then, one thing we've always asked for is always the uncompiled codes. Like if it's just maybe spec with laptop input, the PC input, and wireless sharing. Well, what if they go and add a document camera? We can't go in and change it, and we don't really. And yeah, you can give us the compiled code, but it'd be easier for us to quickly edit the uncompiled code to get it pushed out, compared to having to wait, because being a state entity, we got to go through, get the PO and all this other stuff approval that something that could take days just to get it done, just do 5 minutes work basically. So but I know that argument of who owns the code and all this other stuff comes up with it too. So, but we always try our best to get uncompiled code that way we can easily make the changes as well if we need to.
Yeah, and I will go on record here, and I'll die on this hill. You own the code. The client owns the code. If a programmer out there feels otherwise, feel free to message me. We'll have that conversation. We can bring it on here. We can talk about it. I'm the same way. When we did our new building here, I made sure we got the uncompiled code, and they they kind of fought us on that. And they were like, "Well, you're going to need to sign a agreement that you're not going to change anything." And I flipped around to them and go, "I'm going to sign an agreement. I won't take your software warranty. Like, once it works, okay, great. Now if it changes, it's all on me." So we actually release them from that obligation that, oh, there's a bug in the code, you need to fix it. It's now on my team to fix. But we got the uncompiled code.
And as much as that's been an age-old debate and conversation, I hope by now that the majority of people can understand the importance that the client needs the code. What we do and AV systems, they will, or they're never actually ever done. They're done when they get pulled out. That's when they're really done. So you have to be able to modify, make updates, make adjustments. And Aaron, I wanted to kind of touch on something that you said about being able to minimize the button presses and understand the user's needs and so forth. How much of that is really that refinement? How much does that come into play in what you do? Because I think it's an important part. It's the iteration that are that is typical in programming and software development that hasn't always found its way to AV.
Yeah, I think it's more, I honestly, the reason why I did it was I was annoyed with it. So I have no left projector disc. I was annoyed with it. It's like I'd rather, if I'm going to change all four, I want a button that does all four. And I know there's users that we have that they like the split screen option, and there's users that don't like it. So no, I wanted to. At least that's why, at least for the ones who do like the split, no, it's a big, it's not hidden per se, but it's it's a button they have to push to do the split screen. But I think just trying to refine that UI to make the teaching aspect of it make sense was kind of the hardest for me. It's like I think I had one version, I don't remember quite what it was, but I think some of the wording I had was like, it didn't really make sense. So trying to get there, like, okay, well, there was one iteration where I actually had like the projector controls on a separate screen, not on the front main screen, and kind of thinking, okay, you want to, and you don't think about like, okay, maybe if the professor wants to quickly turn off projector, which raises the screen up, the way they can write on the board and then quickly turn it back on. It's one button. They don't have to hit. It's still one button instead of three buttons again. But I think that was kind of hard, like making that pedagogy stuff make sense.
That's a good question, and I know I've been asked this. So I'll ask you, Aaron, is who's making those decisions and determination with your UI? Like you said, you got frustrated, so you change it so you can hit a button that goes to all four. Like, do you have conversations with your faculty members and have them look at the UI and provide feedback and make changes, or is your team kind of driving what that UI looks like and that experience?
Kind of a little bit of a both still. I know when I had like what I thought was gonna be my final UI, we did a test fit to see if I was going to kind of if I was going to have this just to see if I was going to have to rewrite some code or if we could use the existing. But we got when were doing that test, when I put it out to some of those rooms, that it's like it had to be it was like today where it's the end of a Friday type deal, but there were still some instructors around that, like, if we saw them, I was like, hey, come take a look. What do you think? And got some really good feedback on it that make having another iteration, which finally turned out course, it wasn't the final iteration, but still went through a lot of stuff, just trying to get feedback best we can. I know we probably be a little better getting some feedback, but usually for the most part, it's people have been welcoming the change, and it's been a slow rollout too. So I kind of think of the uh, ones who are getting that new UI, there are beta testers, and you know, there have been some comments made, and so like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll put that button back that I took off, and other stuff. So I think that's usually how it usually goes down.
Yeah, as we're getting close to wrapping up, I want to throw out a question to both of you. James, can start with you on it. Is how important is being standardized throughout your organization on either UI or functionality versus being customized for the users for particular systems? And I'm sure that part of this is going to be depends on who the user is, and but that aside, it's because that's where you have to almost have opposing forces, if you will.
So in my view, in my opinion, standardized experience is critical. Is what I drive for, is because there's a lot of reasons why I like a standard UI in all the rooms, because then all my techs know it, my help desk know it, my faculty know it, my students know it. So even if someone's in a room and they're like, hey, I can't get this on, they know where the buttons are. They know what it's supposed to do and all that stuff. So they can walk through without going, well, you're in room one. Well, let me see, that has this panel and these things. Oh, wait, you got to do this. Oh, wait, no, you're in room five. You got to do it this way. I come in, no matter what room, hit the buttons. They do the same thing. Now, each room will, yeah, you're going to have uniqueness. Those were, like I think Aaron kind of said, where you have those advanced buttons. Like I'm very keen on the advanced button. I'll make my standard UI or my standard experience, and then have that option where advancing give those power users the more flexibility, but a basic user can just come in and use the room. I still think that standard goes important with the code, because then if all your code is standardized, like Aaron said, like this is what we do for displays, or this is what we do in this module, you can easily hand that off to another programmer and they know where to go in the code. So same with wiring. Like I like to have all my, PCs in on this input, dock cams on this input, laptops on this input. So no matter what room they go into and they're like, oh, the dock cam not working. They know, oh, that's supposed to be on this input. Oh, someone unplugged it. It's over here. Let's move it back. It's very easy instead of trying to figure out per room.
Aaron, similar question, and I know you touched on giving out, even samples of your code. How important is it to you to really keep things fairly standardized versus getting off on um, the one-offs that may be a little bit more addressing the particular needs of a situation or a user versus the needs of across the whole campus or organization?
Yeah, I think one thing I've done with our one-offs, especially, is that I start off on that base code and then I change it how I need it to be. Like right now, our standardized code it's for most of our rooms, it's one projector, and it may or may not have a TV for Zoom for instructors to throw the Zoom audience to in the back. But so like if another room we're planning on upgrading, it has two projectors in, so I can just open up that code and be like, okay, it's not usually a standard room, but I know how to go in and copy that module, add that projector in, change the config file if need be. But I always like starting off with that base code and then editing it from there.
I'm here.
That's great. And it's something I think is going to help for maintenance and long-term upgrades. Is that one of the reasons that you go that route as well is what James mentioned in terms of being able to troubleshoot and know what somebody should expect in a room.
Yeah, and like him talking about like, okay, this is on HTML1, this is on HTML2, this is on HTML3. Like that's something we're trying to push for sure because we've had some integrators where um they had their own set, then we had another integrator come through, and maybe they swapped to like input what was on input 5 on one integrator is probably input 3 on the other. So one thing we're trying to help standardize is okay, this is HDMI1. All the PCs are for sure on HDMI1, all the laptops are on HDMI2, and so forth. And then questions, I think one thing that gets complicated is that we have our basic what we call Zoom app rooms, which is desktop computer with a PTZ camera and a DSP microphone setup that's plugged in. Then we have some at our full Zoom room classrooms. So it has all the extra computer and what we need to do for capturing and whatnot. And so like trying to figure out, okay, how do we merge both into the HDMI's standard as well? And so that's been a fun experience trying to correct all that, get everything set up correctly.
I'm sure that's if standards are great and you need to be very disciplined to maintain them. But it's probably a good place for us to stop on this one. But another great conversation. Aaron, thank you for being part of this. Aaron Baker from Stephen F. Austin State University. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, and continue the conversation if they'd like?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a good way, and I'll kind of give them a plug again too. That find me on the HETMA community as well. Like I've been trying to be more active. I'm a fairly new member, but I've been trying to stay as active as I can in there when something comes up. And one thing I do enjoy that HETMA has is they actually just have a closed community for higher ed people, so you can get your honest opinions and all that. So uh, I try to monitor that community a lot too, and feel free to if you're on there, feel free to message me on there as well.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being with us and joining this conversation. We'll also look forward to having you in the Ask the Programmer LinkedIn group as well.
Thanks for having
James,
me.
how can people get in touch with you, learn more what you're up to, and also continue this conversation?
Again, Google me. I'm out there. Anything with HEPMA, I'll connect with Aaron. He's great. He's been an active member of HEPMA, as you mentioned. So definitely get involved with him there. Again, like I always say, Google me. You'll find me.
Excellent. And you can find James and me and that aforementioned LinkedIn group for Ask the Programmer. So jump in there. We're going to use that as a way to continue some of the topics and conversations and get your feedback on episodes and put up polls and try to really stimulate some community amongst programmers and fans of the show. So please join us there. We'd like to hear from you. For me, you could reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media, trying to be as active on LinkedIn as I have been before on Twitter and X. So that's probably a good place, even though the posts aren't always received in real time. But also, you could find my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net, and we're a supporter of the show where we help programmers get their projects done and build some tools and utilities that are very valuable to making projects go smoother. And you could find those at controlconcepts.net. And we'd like to hear from you and hope that you follow us, whether you're watching us on the YouTube channel or listening to us on your favorite podcast player. Leave us a rating, review, some feedback, and let us know if you'd like to be part of the show. We either field your questions or we will invite you to be a guest. But either way, we'd like to make sure that we're having the conversations that need to be had around programming and control within the AV industry. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.